Hello again. I, for one, will not be all that sorry to see Boris Johnson leave, although it seems we are still stuck with him till the autumn. Perhaps he thinks that the Conservative Party will change its mind. Certainly, all the possible successors are awful and mainly from immigrant families. We are now beginning to see the true scale of Johnson's legacy and the concrete results of the madness which he instigated a little over a year ago when he closed schools and prevented people from seeing their doctors. I want to talk about this a little this morning because there are two clues as to what Johnson actually caused, and both have emerged this week. The first is that excess deaths in this country, that is to say deaths over and above the 5-year average, are rising. Only a tiny number of these are connected in any way at all with COVID. In the description to this video, I give a link to the figures from the Office of National Statistics. Click on the link and scroll down until you come to the graph which shows weekly deaths for the last 2 years. The deaths which have nothing to do with COVID are coloured green, and they are rising. They're above the 5-year average now, and nobody quite wants to say why this should be in the middle of summer. It's not as though it's winter and we have a flu epidemic or anything, is it? The reason is very simple, and those deaths are going to keep rising. During the restrictions imposed because of COVID, many of which are still in force at doctors' surgeries, many people have not seen a doctor for years. That strange itchy lump on their skin, which might be skin cancer, has not been seen by the GP, who would recognise it swiftly and refer the person to a specialist. We were all worried about burdening the NHS, and so people with other symptoms didn't like to be a nuisance. Unless it was COVID, they just kept quiet about it because COVID was the only important thing, wasn't it? Some of those symptoms were indicative of deadly diseases like cancer and diabetes. People are now dying of those undiagnosed conditions. My own GP still has the doors locked, and you can only get a telephone consultation, and even that's unlikely to be for a few days. Those deaths from things which are not COVID are going to rise, and I rather think in the next year or two they will be an epidemic in themselves of illnesses which could have been treated or cured. I expect that the number of those deaths will far exceed those who died with COVID. I think that Boris Johnson's panicky reaction will ultimately result in a catastrophic number of avoidable deaths. The second thing to note is that the ability of primary school children to read and write has fallen sharply. This has a terrible impact on their ability to cope in secondary school and will handicap their entire education and prospects in life generally. In 2019, 78% of 11-year-olds met the expected standard in writing for their age. This year it has dropped to 68%. To put this another way, 1/3 of the children at primary school in Britain are not reaching what is regarded as a basic standard of writing and the ability to use the English language. Ponder that for a moment and ask yourself what you think the effect of this deficit will be as they move to secondary school. This is only the beginning, of course, of a huge slump in achievement by young people in Britain. Who do viewers think will be most badly affected by this? Do they think it will be the children of well-to-do middle-class professionals who will have been employing tutors and so on for their children during the school closures? The ones who were off work and so could devote their time to teaching their children at home? Or do they think that the worst affected will be ordinary children from working class homes, where the parents had to continue working as taxi drivers or delivering groceries and so on, having to make do with any arrangements for the children that they could manage? This then is the real legacy of Boris Johnson. A new generation of underachieving teenagers from working class backgrounds and a rising mortality rate, again among working people who cannot afford private medical care and dare not take time off work.